Good afternoon. Welcome to CCA Live. We understand that you might be zoomed out, so we're grateful that you've decided to spend an hour with us today. Each session of CCA Live features experts who will provide you with valuable insight and information as we continue to navigate these unprecedented times. I encourage you to bookmark our CCA Live website to check out past sessions featuring candid conversations with CCA President Dr. Yolanda Watson-Spiva and leaders from a variety of organizations, including Excellencia, NACADA, and NIPSI, and past webinars with ACRO, accreditors across the nation, and other higher education leaders. Thank you for joining us for part one of Getting Ready to Serve Today's Students of our 8-week calendar series featuring the outstanding work done at Waukesha County Technical College in Wisconsin. This 3-part series features blog posts and accompanying webinars across the next 6 weeks. Hopefully you've had a chance to read the first blog and share it with your colleagues. I'll add the link in the chat box for you to read later. I encourage you to send questions via the Q&A option on Zoom and chat with other attendees in the chat box. We've built in about 10 minutes towards the end of the webinar to answer your questions. If you have follow-up questions, Nicole and Brad will be sharing their email addresses. You can send them questions directly or catch us on part 2 and part 3 of this series. I'm excited to introduce our 2 panelists, Brad Piazza and Nicole Gahagan. Dr. Brad Piazza has dedicated 23 years of his professional career to helping students reach their academic and career goals through higher education. He currently serves as the Vice President of Learning from Waukesha County Technical College, or WCTC, in Wisconsin. Prior to this position, he served 9 years as Dean of the School of Business at WCTC. In his current role, Brad serves as the Chief Academic Officer and as the co-lead in the implementation of guided pathways and an 8-week calendar, academic calendar. Before joining WCTC, he served for 11 years as Assistant Dean of the School of Business at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. Brad believes that every student should have the opportunity to complete a credential in a timely manner and that the college has the responsibility of ensuring that's possible. He believes that the work he does in higher ed changes lives for the current generation, but also for generations to come. Nicole Gahagan is a high-performing, solutions-oriented student success strategist committed to equity in higher education, currently serving as a student support consultant at Mount Mary University. Skilled at developing relationships and building motivation among stakeholder groups to accelerate change and produce meaningful outcomes, she's achieved early success in transforming institutions. Nicole has extensive experience in team training and project management and has a proven record of identifying systemic issues and responding with well-executed action plans for continuous improvement. Thank you, Brad and Nicole, for joining us today. Please, I am going to stop sharing my screen and you'll be able to share yours, and I'll hop back on when it's time for the Q&A portion.
You guys see that? All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Brad Piazza. Nicole and I are really excited to have this opportunity to share the story of our 8-week academic calendar. And before we get into that, certainly a special thanks to Complete College America and specifically Melanie and Nicholas for approaching us to see if we would be interested in sharing the work that we've done at our institution with people within the CCA network. also a thanks to some of the colleges that we learned from across the country who have pioneered this work for some of us. As a way to help us know who's there, because it's a little different format maybe than we're all used to, in your chat box, if you would not mind just typing in what institution or organization you belong to, that would be really cool. Then we know somebody is actually out there listening to us, and we can kind of see what kind of institutions we're reaching. I'd like to do a special hello today to our friends from McGraw-Hill, who I think are on here, Studer Education Group, and certainly our colleagues from WCTC, who I'm sure there's some of them out there as well. Hi to all of you. What we're going to present, and as Melanie mentioned, this is the first of a three-part series. This is an opportunity for us to share with you, but has been the work of many, many, many people at WCTC. And so we just get to share the great work that was done by so many, because we had the unique opportunity to be able to lead it for the past few years. So please know that we did not do all of this ourselves, and we're certainly grateful to all of our colleagues who made this work possible and continue to work on it. So if I can start real quickly by how this all began. Nicole and I were at a conference, and it was either like Higher Learning Commission or Achieve the Dream or one of those, and we were sitting in a session put on by Trident Technical College out in South Carolina, and they were talking about their 8-week calendar. And we sat there and we kind of looked at each other and gave that collective, that's cool. Maybe we should be thinking about that, because as they were presenting their student data, we were pretty sure that if we started to dig deep into our own information, that we very much would have the same types of students. So that's how this started, was by attending a conference. And as you all know, if you go to a conference and bring back one good nugget with you, it's a successful trip. Well, that one nugget led to a solid 3 years of intense work and beyond for us in the institution. So they never sent us anything again after that. Please know that this is our story. We're not giving you if you're thinking about doing something like this, this is how we approached it. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's what worked for us, but it'll at least give you maybe some things to think about as you're either in the process of looking at a different type of calendar, how to increase student success and persistence, or whatever the case may be. So with that, we're hoping that we give you something to think about, and let's get rolling here. So if my slide will advance, there we go. So as you know, this is the first of a three-part series. So this is called Getting Ready to Serve Today's Students. The blog was out there. Hopefully you had a chance to read that. Our second blog will post next week. So this is what we're going to be focusing on as the section in red today. So really looking at the three questions that we started with as an institution. So that's what we're going to walk through today. So I'll start, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Badger State and Waukesha County Technical College. We are one of 16 technical colleges in the state of Wisconsin. We are one of the unique states that has both a 2-year UW system as well as an independent technical college system. So we are part of the latter group. And as you can see, we are scattered all over the state as a system. The area in the red circle is us. And so we are about, 20 to 30 miles west of the city of Milwaukee. So we have our friends from Milwaukee Area Technical College to the east, our friends from Madison Area Technical College to the west, and we're kind of sitting right in between them. We are, as an institution, an occupational granting Associate of Applied Science is the highest degree that we award. So we are not set up as a liberal art transfer institution. So we are definitely, our mission is focused on getting students prepared for the workforce. We serve right around 20,000 students, all encompassing. So that's, everybody from course takers to corporate training to certificates all the way up through the associate degree, as well as a large number of high school students that are taking advantage of earning some college credits at this point in their life. We're at about 3,200 full-time equivalents right now. Like many of you probably, we've seen that number drop, unfortunately, over a number of years, and we'll talk about that as one of our drivers. As we go through this, some of you may say, well, the data they're putting in front of us looks dated. Keep in mind that the data that we're sharing with you is the information that we used at our institution and externally to really build the case for why we were switching to a different academic calendar. So that as you go through this, just keep that in mind, and that was the reason for it. So one of the things that we did early is really start to make the case as to why this might be something we need to consider. And when I say this is transitioning to an 8-week year-round academic calendar. So you can see this is from the Manpower Group. And so one of our colleagues was at a meeting with the Manpower Group, which is headquartered in Milwaukee. And she had brought back some interesting information, one of which was this graphic that showed the job demand and projected job openings through 2021. Now, keep in mind, this is all pre-COVID, so this might look a little bit different now if they were presenting it. But you can see down in the area of the state where Waukesha is located that there was significant projected job openings, new job openings in our part of the state. Assuming that many of you are with 2-year colleges, some of you might be specifically technical colleges, you probably hear the same thing from your employers that we do. We need your students faster. We can't find employees, but we want them to still be competent and have the same skill level that we're accustomed to getting from your college. And so one of the drivers for us was certainly the employer feedback and trying to really fill that skills gap that for many of us has been a continued challenge. This is the unfortunate trend chart for our credit enrollment since 2014. So, and this might be similar to some of your institutions as well. For 2-year colleges, as you know, our enrollment follows the unemployment lines, but in the opposite direction. So if unemployment is high, our enrollments tend to go up. If unemployment is low, the enrollments. And during the course of this time, the unemployment rate in Waukesha County was hovering at around 2%, which is exceptionally low. And our enrollments were certainly feeling the effects of that, in addition to the fact that we just were not really changing at a pace we needed to as an institution. So just to give you some idea, from 2014 through 17, that downward trend resulted in about $3.2 million in lost tuition revenue based on just credit enrollment. Now, if your institutions are anything like ours, we're not seeing necessarily an increased amount of money from anybody. And so we, rely on student tuition. And so if your enrollments continue to decline, your tuition revenue part of the pie starts to shrink as well. So this, along with the job demand and then really digging into those questions, were the main reasons that we started to put all the pieces together to get us to the point of moving to a new academic calendar. And so with that, I'm going to transition to Nicole, and she's going to start really walking through the profile of the WCTC students.
Thank you. Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. Like Melanie mentioned, my name is Nicole Gehagen. I'm currently a student support consultant at Mount Mary University, which is a 4-year private institution in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. However, previous to this role, I served as a vice president for student services at Waukesha County for about 5.5 years. And I was Brad's counterpart in this work. And like Brad mentioned, certainly dozens and dozens of others around our institution were a key and crucial component of pulling this off at our institution within just 3 years. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who WCTC is and how we used to approach our work versus how we approach our work now before we get into some of the data. So when WCTC considered measures to improve student success in the past, we generally did one of two things. We either didn't spend enough time examining the root cause of an issue and then overcompensated for that by over-engineering a solution, or conversely, we spent too much time analyzing an issue to the point of paralysis, and then because we had to do something, we would throw up a trendy best practice or some technology gimmick at the problem, sometimes without ever looking back to see if it worked. And I really wonder how many of you can relate to those approaches to improving student success. But Brad and I knew that we had to take a different approach as two new vice presidents at this institution. We knew we needed to be more strategic. Up until fairly recently, we never really had a resource issue at WCTC. We were well-funded, well-staffed, really a dream come true for most institutions. Yet, if you compared our student success rates against some of our fellow institutions within the Wisconsin Technical College system, like you wouldn't really know that we were so well-resourced. We were merely on par with other, oftentimes less resourced institutions, and even most recently started to slip kind of below the middle of the pack in terms of our performance. And performance is important because we're a partially performance-based funded institution. So like I said, this time we knew we needed to be more strategic. Our approach to systemic broad-scale student success really needed for us to understand our primary stakeholders, which are, of course, our students as the foundation of our work. And so we asked ourselves three basic but often overlooked questions before zeroing in on our specific strategy, that being the 8-week academic calendar. The questions we asked ourselves were, who are our students? How do they perform at our institution? And then knowing these things, how would we reimagine our institutions if we could build it from scratch? So I'm going to walk you through our discoveries around the first and the second question, and then Brad's going to take question 3 to briefly describe how we went from an institution with a habit of kind of retrofitting our 100+ year structure and system to one that implements customer-driven innovation. But before moving on, I want to point out one thing. It's that regardless of the institutional change that you're considering or are already undergoing, these 3 questions can serve your college really well. While they might seem elementary, I think you'll be surprised to learn how many individuals within your college community maintain their own assumptions about who your students are and how they perform. So I'm going to tell you about what WCTC learned when we started diving into our data. But first, before we go into that, I want to ask you, what have been the most surprising discoveries that you've made about your students on your campus, or what is one thing you want to know about your students that you don't yet, and if you could get your hands on the data, you would just love to know. So let's take about a minute or so. I'm going to invite you to note these items in the chat function to share with Brad and I and the rest of the audience members. Great, I'm seeing some great information here. One person pointed out that in part due to COVID, an institution learned that their students weren't as technologically savvy as we all thought they were. And certainly COVID has taught us a lot about our students and also a lot about the readiness of our institutions to be flexible during times like this. Some people are seeing a decrease in Pell eligible students. One question somebody wants to know is whether or not their students have reliable internet at home. I think a lot of times when we're thinking about solutions to students and thinking about ways we can be more adaptive to 21st century learners, we automatically think about technology and forget that that's not always accessible to everyone. So great, thank you for that participation. All right, so I'm going to tell you more about what WCTC found about their students. One of the first things that we realized is that over half of our students were over the age of 25. with almost 40% of our students being between the ages of 25 and 39. We have an even split, mostly, between males and females. And the percentage of students of color has steadily increased, especially over the last decade. And this percentage has outpaced the racial diversity of our county by about 15 percentage points. So it's good to know that students of color are attracted to our institution. We also learned that more than 3/4 of our students worked either part-time or full-time. In fact, more than 45% of our part-time students worked full-time, and almost 30% of our full-time students were employed full-time. So we knew that students had a lot on their plate just by asking these questions. When we began unveiling this information to our college community, it became clear that even for faculty and staff who have worked at the institution for quite some time, many still held very traditional images in their minds about who our students are. They're especially surprised to learn about the age and the work status of a lot of our students. Okay, so we know this about our students, so now what does this mean for them? Well, when we got to thinking about this image or this profile of our student, we started to think more about what that might mean for them in terms of their ability to not only access but complete their education. And so when you think about what happens between the ages of 25 and 39, you know that most people are starting or growing their families, taking care of children, maybe even taking care of parents by this point. They're working to support themselves and their loved ones. And really, in essence, our students are going to college on top of everything else that's going on in their lives. They don't really have the luxury of the more traditional college student who gets to take 4 years to go to college and then do life. Life is already happening all around our students. And while our students are doing life, they're also trying to fit school into any small nook or cranny that they can. So overlay that lifestyle onto our academic calendar structure as it existed and all the associated systems that go along with it. And you have a recipe for the mediocre performance at best that we were seeing at our institution. So we offered the vast majority of our curriculum during a traditional 16-week fall and spring semester setup. Almost majority during the day and in face-to-face class formats. To boot, a lot of our programs were fall starts only. And so if you were a student or an individual who might have lost your job mid-September and you were looking to reskill or upskill in order to get a new job, you would have to wait almost a year for some programs in order to enroll if you were going to enroll at WCTC. So not exactly the model of convenience for our student demographic. On the next slide, you'll see kind of what was happening to our students because of the academic calendar structure that we offered. An overwhelming 85% of our students enrolled part-time. So that is they enrolled in fewer than 12 credits per fall or spring semester. In fact, most of our students enrolled in 6 or fewer credits per semester. So they took 1, maybe 2 courses per 16 weeks. On average then, students completed only about 13 credits in an academic year. And only about 5% of our students completed 30 credits per academic year, which is what it would take in order to complete a 2-year degree in 2 years. So taking 6 credits per term for a 60 credit associate degrees meant that our students needed 5 years of uninterrupted college work in order to complete their credential. And again, that's only if our students had no interruptions in their life, which really wasn't entirely likely because, you know, life happens a lot for our students. So in our next slide, we're going to talk about how our students performed at our institution. We disaggregated course success, retention, and completion rates by age, race, gender, and enrollment intensity. Where we saw the biggest disparities was when we examined each metric in terms of enrollment intensity and race. For age and for gender, there wasn't much difference in terms of our student success metrics that we were looking at. So I'm going to touch on the results of enrollment intensity and then also race and ethnicity and the performance across course success, retention, and completion in these next slides. So what we're looking at right now is a snapshot of course success data from the academic year of 2017 and 2018. Again, as Brad mentioned, this is the data that we used and kind of shopped around on our communication roadshow to help our internal and our external community members understand why we were making such a significant change. So this data really helped us tell the story of why and answer the question of why are we doing this and why now. So course success for WCTC is a completed course with a C or better. The academic courses, which are represented in blue, are what other people would consider general education courses. And our technical courses are represented in orange. And those are program-specific courses like accounting, welding, nursing, and so on. The two bars on the left show part-time student performance in academic and technical courses, and the two bars on the right show full-time student performance in academic and technical courses. So one thing to note here is that overall our students do better in their technical courses, and that is not very surprising at all, given that we are a technical college. But when we do get to the third part of this three-part series, you'll learn more about how we structured our academic maps to correct for this to some degree. But for now, compare the blue bar against the blue bar and the orange bar against the orange bar. And what you'll see is a 16% difference in course success rates for academic courses and a 14% course success rates for technical courses between part-time and our full-time students. So nearly 1/2 of our part-time students were not passing their general education courses. And almost 1/4 of our part-time students were not passing their technical courses. So this means at best, these students needed to repeat their course, costing them time, money, and effort, and probably more likely, they stopped or eventually dropped out altogether. And you'll start to see how the course success and then the retention and the completion kind of build on each other to produce not so fantastic results in the end. Keeping in mind, of course, that 85% of our students are part-time, so the loss of potential here is significant. So next, we're going to show you our results when we disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So using the same comparison methods as before, the blue bars against blue bars, orange bars against the orange bars, you'll see that there's a difference between course success rates of students of color and students who are white. There's a 14% difference for general education courses and a 6% difference in technical education courses. Of course, nothing to be proud of there, but it becomes especially concerning when we start to compare the course success rates for Black or African American students and white Caucasian students specifically. Here we see a 24% difference in success in general education courses and a 14% difference in course success in technical courses. So clearly we have some equity issues at play here. Previous to this work, WCTC hadn't done a lot with disaggregating our data. We had the data, but quite frankly, we weren't very good at mining that data to help us understand how our students overall or by disaggregated communities were performing at our institution. So a lot of this was really eye-opening for us. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at how WCTC was doing in terms of retention. Of course, course success is a leading indicator of retention. So the results that we see here aren't very surprising at all, yet they are concerning. 85% of our full-time students persisted from fall 2016 to fall 2017, which is great. But again, this only represents about 15% of our student population. Only about 15% of our students are full-time. The other 85% of our students only persisted at a rate of 67%, so that's 18 percentage points less than their full-time counterparts. So again, a lot of lost potential here because our part-time population is so large. Over on the right, we take a look at race and ethnicity. There is a 13% difference in retention rates between our students of color and our students who are white. And again, the biggest gap exists between students who are Black or African American and students who are white or Caucasian. A gaping 25% gap there in terms of that particular student success metric. So finally, on the next slide, we will take a look at completion rates at the 3-year point, so 150% of time, and the 4-year point, which is 200% time for us for our 2-year degrees. So one thing to note here is that this is not IPED data. If it was, it would look pretty good for a 2-year institution, but it is not what this represents. Of course, we track and report IPED's data, but our state system tracks what's called Perkins cohort data. And this is a measurement that tracks students over time, and it's really more representative of who our students are, because our student body isn't made up of many first-time students who would be representative of an IPED cohort. So for this particular cohort measurement, these are students who are newly enrolled in a program at our institution of study. And so they've been new to our institution within the last 4 years and then have completed at least 12 credits. That's the time when the Perkins definition picks these students up. So again, these results here shouldn't be surprising given what we saw on course success and retention slides. We see a 16% and a 15% difference between part-time and full-time 3-year completion and 4-year completion rates respectively. What was most concerning to us when we examined these data is that less than half of our part-time students are completing their credentials, either a technical diploma or an associate degree, in double or more, if it's a technical diploma, in double or more the amount of time it's supposed to take. Over on the right, we see large achievement gaps between students of color and students who are white when we're looking at 3- and 4-year completion rates. Again, the most egregious gap is between students who are Black or African American and students who are white and Caucasian, a 30% gap for 3-year completion rates and a 34% gap for 4-year completion rates. So Brad and I, along with a handful of others, sat with this information and we knew we had to do something, but what? So next up, Brad is going to answer the 3rd question we asked ourselves as an institution.
Thank you. So at this point, we know we have, at least at that time, a lot of projected job demand and a huge skills gap in our part of the state. We knew that our students, or we were looking at our own student performance across different demographic groups, and we had been seeing a continuous decline in student enrollment. So as Nicole said, we sat with this data for a while and understand that this data collection and really getting into this took some time. It takes, we work very closely and continue to work closely with our institutional research partners, and really making sure that what we were looking at was accurate, number one, and number two, that the story that we thought we were seeing was in fact the story. And so we started to talk about this quite a bit. We started to put it in front of other people at the institution, and it was very clear that what we were seeing from our own internal data, as well as looking at external. So there are some other institutions out there that were doing this work. There's a lot of data that's been collected by organizations that we were lining up almost on top of in terms of our story. And so when we got to that point, we're like, okay, now we have this information. What is it that we can do? Because we know that what we're doing isn't working for the majority of our students, and certainly isn't working well for certain populations of our students. And so what could we do that would be different? So this is, and this might look a little bit like your institutions as well. So if you start kind of on the right under retrofitting, we as a college, we're doing an exceptional job at serving the students in the very best way that we possibly could, given the structure that we had set up. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning is we're coming up on our 100-year anniversary. So for almost 100 years, we've been operating for the student that, quite frankly, we've never had. And the traditional model of higher education, to be honest, is really what had started for, you know, the students who were able to dedicate the majority of their day and the majority of their life to pursuing their academic degrees. And for us in the two-year environment, that's certainly not the demographic of student that we were seeing. What we know for sure is that there's really a couple things that need to happen for a student to complete. The first is that they complete the right courses, that they take the right courses. The second is that they complete them successfully, right? So if you can start with those two things, that's a really nice start. In other words, we don't have students trying to navigate an academic map that's inaccurate, that's got a bunch of embedded prereqs that aren't showing up and so on, so that their 60 credit associate degree now is going to take them, you know, 75 to 80 to 80 plus credits to get through, and that we provide the supports necessary to help them succeed in the ultimately the right basket of courses. So if we, and Nicole mentioned this before, if we talk about, you know, the cadence at which our students were going through, and this was semester after semester after semester, continuously the mode of credits being 3 to 6, and you take that 60 credit associate degree, and if a student takes the top end of 6 credits, they're looking at 10 semesters, which was 5 years. And we say 5 years for our institution because summer was really not utilized much at all. You know, we'd throw out a handful of classes, but for the most part, we were forcing students out of our institution for a month, hoping they would, or I'm sorry, for 3 months or 2.5 months, and hoping they would come back. And then doing the same thing over the holiday break between the fall and the spring semester. And so, you know, so 5 years, best case scenario. And during 5 years, if you think of your own life, how many things can come in to interrupt and put school, quite frankly, on a back burner for a minute, because you have your own family to raise, you're taking care of aging parents, you're getting a job, changing jobs, losing a job, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of stuff that pushes school, you know, a little bit down on that priority list. And so we were doing everything we could to retrofit our systems and our college to serve those students, and did the very best we could. But we were at a point where we had to do something different, right? And so on the left, we really start to look at, you know, what could we do to really serve the student that we have? And interestingly, we were forcing, in some respects, our students to be part-time by the way that we were setting up our programs, by the way that we were scheduling classes, by all of the, maybe the downtime that we were not offering courses on campus and so on. And so, you know, we, in some respect, had built a system and delivered a system that really put students in the position to not be able to go full time. And so one of the things that we talk about all the time is, let's not assume that part-time is a fixed variable. What if students could really start to approach that full-time line of 12 credits or more in a quote unquote semester to get to that, you know, credential a little bit sooner and ultimately get into the workforce. One of the questions I had seen in the Q&A in the chat, I wanted to emphasize, we're not a liberal art transfer institution. We are an occupational granting institution, so we don't offer the AA or the AS. We offer the Associate of Applied Science. It doesn't mean our students don't transfer. A number of them do, and they pursue their 4-year degree at some point after finishing with us. But our mission is to get students ready for the workforce, not for transfer into a 4-year institution like maybe a more traditional community college would be. So, in keeping in mind the data that Nicole shared with you, we also spent a lot of time looking at Noah Levitt's data and our graduate follow-up data or graduate follow-up reports that we would do every year. And what's interesting is that while our quantitative stuff wasn't changing from year to year, our qualitative stuff was not either. And I know stuff is a highly technical term, but you know, what students were telling us continuously in these surveys was reflected in the information that Nicole shared with you. Year after year after year, we were hearing great things. They love the college, they love their faculty, the education, our facilities, but it was taking them too long. They wanted to get on with their life, with their careers. They wanted more flexible scheduling. They didn't want to have to wait 2 years for courses to pop up at night if that's what they were doing. We weren't offering any degrees completely online, with the exception maybe of 1 or 2. And so if you think about your average age of 26 and 85% part-time, and you don't offer any alternative types of delivery, that really kind of forces the hand of a longer time to completion. And they didn't want their summers off. I mean, I personally had students say, why do you continuously force us out of here in the summer? We just want to be done. I can pick up a class or 2 in the summer. That takes, you know, a semester, a year off of my academic clock. And so we were hearing this continuously. These weren't just like one point in time things that we were hearing. So when we stopped and looked at all of this together, we said it's time to do some true transformational change at this institution. And one thing that I'll mention, and we'll talk much more about this in blogs 2 and 3, for those of you that might be thinking about doing something like this, understand that while there's an incredible heavy lift from learning and student services, it's not just learning and student services. Your entire college, everything from how you pay people to faculty contracts to how you operate your food service, your support services, your library, your information technology, everything has to get looked at. And so while learning and student services, at least in our case, led this effort, we had individuals from across the college, from every area of the college, involved with this, because ultimately it's going to change the way that you operate. At least that was the case for us, and the other institutions that we talked to, as well as we were going through this kind of learning process, told us the same thing. So here was the other thing I would like to share, and I think somebody had asked a question about this as well. So this WCTC had been offering 8-week classes across campus in certain pockets, and we weren't doing a lot, but we had some programs that were doing 8-week, or we would throw a course out in 8-week format, and we had been doing this for a number of years, but no concentrated effort in it. But we had enough, and what I'm showing you here is spring of 2019 data. I could pull up any semester for probably the last 5 years, and it would tell you the exact same thing. So we had, in these 8-week classes, in this particular term, we had about 3,600 registrations in these 8-week classes, duplicated. So my point in telling you that is this wasn't like a sample size of 100 out of, you know, thousands of students, but a pretty significant number. And what we were seeing, and you'll see 8-week, so I'm looking at the chart on the left right now. So the 91% was for the first 8-week classes, 92.7% for the second 8-week classes. So this was WCTC's data. And this is important for institutions to think about. We can put, and we did put up national data that supported this. But as you can imagine, the first thing you'd hear is, well, that's not our students. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to show you our students. And so these are WCTC student success rates in 8-week classes. So a C or better from spring of 19 was about 10 percentage points higher than 16-week courses. And then we looked at the withdrawal rate. And you'll see, you know, 3.7% and, you know, 3 percent in comparison, almost 10% for 16 weeks. And if you think about that for a minute, over the course of 8 weeks, there's less time for something to interfere with a student being able to complete, right? Time is the enemy of completion. Somebody said that once, and I think it's an awesome line. And so, again, and I need to pull last semester's data. I haven't done that yet, but this has been a continuous thing. Again, we have this from multiple semesters. I wanted to throw up our nicest graphic for you to look at, but we could look at pretty much any semester for the past 5 years and see very much the same story. And so I'm sure some of you might be saying, well, 8 weeks is really fast and they're not going to be successful. And I would challenge you to look at your own data if you have some 8-week classes and see if that's really true. Because we thought the same thing. You think if I have twice the amount of time, logic says that I should do better, but the data doesn't support that. And so this was a really compelling chart and a compelling piece of our puzzle and our story for moving this forward. So all of that information we have, and so in the back of our mind, we're thinking, all right, if we can figure out a way to get students an opportunity to accumulate 30 credits in an academic year, in theory, they should be in a position and have a realistic opportunity of finishing their quote unquote 2-year degree in 2 years. And this is consistent with CCA's 15 to Finish initiative and moving that type of work forward. So everything was pointing to change. And so this is what we were shooting for. And so I'll show you the graphic of what our calendar looks like in the next slide, but so we're set up we did not change our traditional academic calendar. We're still a 16-week semester. We didn't have to go through the change process with the Higher Learning Commission, our regional accrediting body. We're still a 16-week semester. We just broke it up into 2 terms. And so what we've done is provide students an opportunity at the pace that they have been demonstrating to accumulate 30 credits in an academic year, utilizing summer. One of the things that we'll talk more about in our second blog is, redoing our program maps to include summer. Summer isn't an option in a program map anymore. And so students have the opportunity, should they decide to continue at that 6 credit cadence per term, to be able to realistically get 30 credits in an academic year, which would get them, 60 credits in 2 years, by taking 2 classes at a time, which is what they've been doing. So that's what our goal was. And so this is what our calendar looks like right now. And I should back up. So we just launched this calendar literally this fall. So we are right now in week 5 of our first 8-week term. So we can't tell you that our persistence is what our retention is yet. We can't tell you that we've, shortened time to completion yet. But we have some early wins that I wanted to share with you. Right now, our head count is down for fall 4.6%. This was as of last week from the previous fall, head count. But our FTEs are down 1%. And yes, that's negative, but it's slowing down. The rapid decline now is starting to slow down. And if we compare that to some of our other sister institutions in our system who are seeing double-digit declines in FTEs. And we're also seeing over 90% of our students who registered for term 1 also registering for term 2 at the same time, which is significant for financial aid, which is a different story all on its own. And so we're starting to see some signs that students are registering, even though we have fewer of them, they're registering for more courses. And our average credits per student, which is one of the key metrics that we'll be watching, is starting to slowly creep up. And when I say slowly, I'm talking about, a 0.1% here and a 0.1% there, but it's going in the right direction after going negative for so many years. We're also seeing, we're up 271 quote unquote seats from last fall, which would make sense if your FTE decline is starting to slow down, that students are taking more courses, that you would be filling more seats. So those are some of the early success metrics that we're watching, and we're pretty confident that one of the reasons that we're only down 1% at this point is because of this calendar and the fact that students could register for more courses. We're also seeing students start to register or start to apply and be admitted for the second fall term, which will start in the middle of October. So students who didn't start in term one, who we used to have to say, now you have to wait until January, now have an opportunity to jump in October. And we're starting to see new student registrations come in that second term. So again, we're set up with 2 terms. At week 9, we take a break, so we have a fall break, and then we start up with term 2. We do have a little winter interim, like 2 weeks where we can put a class in. We have a spring term 1, then a spring break, spring term 2, all of these 8 weeks, and then a summer interim, which is a 4-week that starts up right away in May, and then the summer term being an 8-week term. And so we are running stuff year round, utilizing our facilities. We make a heavy investment in our facilities and our buildings and our programs. And so this is what our new academic calendar is looking like. Now, 100% of our programs are offering courses in 8 weeks, but not 100% of courses are running in 8 weeks. So we have some programs that the entire thing is in 8 weeks. And we have some that are a mix, and they're getting their feet wet with teaching in this format, and then we'll start to work on converting some of their other courses to 16 weeks. And so we've done an incredible amount of work to get to this point, but we're still very much on that learning curve as we're, wrapping up to finish up our first term here. So, Nicole?
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm not sure that our learning curve will ever end either. The more we accomplish, the more we learn, the more questions we have. And so it's just all about continuous improvement. So as we mentioned, this is a 3-part blog and webinar series. You learned today about the 3 questions we asked ourselves and kind of the revelations and the ideas that we had as a result of those 3 fairly simple questions. But just by what we uncovered through that discovery process at our institution, it led us down this path, which is a pretty large undertaking. So in our second blog and webinar, we're going to talk more about really how we got the rest of the institution to come along with us. You'll hear about how we aligned some of the other major institutional reforms, such as implementing guided pathways, with this new idea about an academic calendar. In the messaging and the communication strategies that we use to help inform our internal and external college community about what our ideas were, and then also about the team structure that we developed, which garnered input and really deep engagement amongst over 70 faculty and staff members, which was, each one of those individuals really helped us to champion this work and to get the rest of the buy-in from the rest of the internal and the external community. Our third blog is all about really the nuts and bolts for the academic calendar. So if you are specifically interested in how we have set up what happens in the classroom and how we have set up all these systems and processes outside of the classroom, that's where you're going to get a lot of kind of the nuts and the bolts, or the meat and the potatoes, in terms of exactly what this looked like. From like a functional or a mechanism standpoint. So you'll learn more about what happened within academics, how we prepared faculty to change the way they delivered courses, and then also how we redesign both physically and operationally our student services in terms of enrollment services and student support as well. Some of the biggest questions are typically with regard to course scheduling and financial aid. So we can talk more about how we pulled that off without having to go through some major structural changes with our regional accreditor or with the Department of Education as well. Okay.
All right, I'm sure there's some questions by now.
Perfect. So I will, we have a few minutes left. I think we can work in a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A and then follow up via email or on part 2 and part 3 addressing some of the questions. So one of the first questions from Karen is, when you say the focus is to get students into the workforce, does that mean students won't meet transfer requirements to 4-year colleges with the degree that they earn?
So again, our mission is focused on getting students prepared for work. So we're not a liberal art transfer institution. Having said that, we have a number of articulation agreements with four-year partners who take our entire degree, and students move into their institutions with junior status. This calendar has had no impact. In fact, most of the four-year colleges have been very intrigued and started to ask how we went about doing this. So it's had zero impact so far.
Yeah, about 20% of our students transfer and continue on for a baccalaureate degree.
Another quick question is, how long is the summer interim?
I want to say it's 4 weeks.
It's 4 weeks.
I think it's 4 weeks, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
so students would really realistically only take one course during that time.
And a question from Claire is, has there been a demand for full 16-week courses from your students, or consideration for adding some 16-week courses back in?
So not all the courses move to 8 weeks, or we still offer a number over 16 weeks. And so we'll see once we get a little bit further into this what that looks like. I suspect what we might see is that a student who's been clipping along with some 8-week classes now hits a 16-week one, and it kind of disrupts their cadence and their credit accumulation, that they might actually go the opposite way and say, no, I would like more 8-week classes. So we'll see as we get further into this.
All right, the courses that were difficult to change, at least at the very beginning, to an 8-week format were like our clinical courses, or our students would have practicums and things of that nature, where we had to rely on external partners to be part of our students' education and training. So that's, I think, where the majority of the courses that didn't change lie.
And another question from Patricia is, how long did it take to get faculty and staff buy-in to transition to the 8-week modality?
We'll let you know when we get 100% buy-in. It took some time. I'm not going to lie, but we've made a significant investment in training and development to help them. We didn't just say, one thing we did as an institution is we said, we're going to do this, and we're going to provide an incredible amount of support for you to be successful in this. So we didn't just throw them to the wolves and say, good luck. I mean, we're still providing training around this, but Nicole and I and others spent a lot of time with the quote unquote roadshow telling this story. And it's interesting when you start to put the data in front of your faculty, they're like, I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. So we had a really strong core faculty champion group that helped us immensely with their peers in moving this work forward.
Yeah, we were very intentional about faculty involvement in the planning and the execution process. We had faculty members on our core team, and then, like Brad said, we also had a team dedicated to assisting faculty with transitioning, just not only in terms of the duration of the course, but also changing from a primarily face-to-face format to a face-to-face and online and a hybrid format.
And did your dual credit students have any issues transitioning to an 8-week modality?
So our dual credit students, we run some different types of dual enrollment programs. We have a dual enrollment academy, which we kept 16 weeks on the high school calendar. If somebody is enrolling in one of our 8-week courses through kind of a Start College Now, where they leave high school, come and sit in our classroom with our college students, they quite frankly are probably in an 8-week class. And I have heard nothing specifically from that group. Interestingly enough, I do have a meeting with the local school districts next week, and that'll be one of the things I'll be asking, is how that transition has been going for their students.
Okay, and one last question in our last 2 minutes. Are you an open admissions campus? And then what adjustments are made for students who need to begin in a lower level math, reading, or English course?
Yep, we are an open access institution. We use multiple measures when determining where students should be placed in terms of their gateway courses, their English or math courses. And part of what you'll hear about in our third blog, our webinar, is the developmental education redesign that our institution went through kind of just prior to this 8-week calendar system, which was a really nice precursor to changing to this 8-week calendar, because the majority of our students are able to start in that gateway course, but then they have co-requisite support that is going to help them succeed at the same rates as individuals who would have been placed in that higher one had the students who needed the additional support been historically placed in a remedial or developmental education course. So we've done away with a lot of our developmental education and have embedded a lot of support into the gateway course, and we'll certainly be happy to share some of our success data related to that dev ed redesign in some future blogs and webinars coming up shortly.
All right, well, we're at time. Nicole and Brad, thank you so much for doing this entire series and highlighting your work that you've done at WCTC. This webinar was recorded, so you'll be emailed a link to a very short evaluation, and then there will be information on how you can access the recording. I've captured all the great questions that have come through the Q&A and chat, and we'll be sharing those with Brad and Nicole so that they can address them in future webinars and blogs. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. I'm Melanie Harris, Strategy Director at CCA. Thank you so much again for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.